Today, we're talking about Gold Border EDH cards. What are the best ones? What's the best Gold Border EDH card? We're going to talk about it here. We're going to talk about the championship decks that these cards came from. Why Gold Border, though? These cards aren't tournament legal. We're going to get into all of that, and the video starts right now.
Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below.
Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. I'm Jake. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. Today is a wild day. It's a wild day today as we're talking about Gold Border EDH cards. We're going to talk about the top 10 Gold Border cards. We're going to talk about where they came from, a brief little history of these cards. I'm going to talk about the ones that I think are good Gold Border cards that you could pick up if you have a casual EDH circle. I'm going to talk about some of the cards that I think are traps, things that you need to avoid. And then after that, I'm going to talk about the 10 Gold Border cards that are my favorite pickups for EDH that came out of the decks, the World Championship decks from 1997 to 2004. If you like these videos where we jump into MTG Finance, we talk about the scarce cards, the reserve list, all of those naughty, dirty, awful things that we're not supposed to talk about because Twitter will get mad at us, then I encourage you to click like and subscribe. It's the best way to support the channel with just the click of a button. Let's get into it. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the World Championship decks that appeared in 1997 to 2004. These are the decks that the Gold Border cards appear in. I'm going to make sure that this is linked in the description of the video. I encourage you to go through, do your own due diligence. Make sure you search through all of these. There's going to be different tabs and then 4 decks in each tab each year. It looks like they did a top 4. Essentially, this was a way for players to have an understanding of what pros played in a given year. This made expensive decks of the time accessible to players. They just weren't tournament legal. So if you were interested in what the top tier decks were, you could have purchased one of these. You would have been able to play the exact cards that the pros used that year. So again, go through, check through these. I'm going to talk a little bit now before we talk about the top 10 about what cards I think are good for a budget and then what cards I think are a trap. So a big thing you should know about Gold Border cards is they're not tournament legal. EDH was originally a casual format. It popped up, I believe, in 2009 is when I first started hearing about it. And the idea was just to play any card from throughout the history of MTG. And so we started throwing decks together. But what you need to know is that over the years, a lot of the cards we're going to talk about today have gone up in value. And I mean like way up. And so if you are in a casual EDH circle or CEDH circle, most players just want people who can play the game. If you don't want to buy a proxy, you're looking for something that's a little bit more sanctioned, something that was created by Wizards of the Coast, then Gold Border cards might be the way for you. They are a fraction of the price of some of their reserve list regular copies. So the cards that I think are great pickups are stuff like Birds of Paradise, Dust Bowl, Wasteland. These cards are nice, but what you need to know is they're not reserve list. So they're going to be reprinted in the future, whether it's a master set or a standard set. And so it's best to just pick up a regular copy of those cards. It gives you a playable copy that you can use in sanctioned tournaments. But now I want to talk for a second about the cards that I think are a trap. And those are going to be cards like Vampiric Tutor, Phyrexian Arena, very popular EDH reprints that, again, are not reserve list. That old art Vampiric Tutor is very attractive, but Vampiric Tutor is most likely going to be reprinted in master set after master set. It is not reserve list. It is a very powerful and attractive card that helps sell sets. So if you're going to spend good money on a Gold Border Vampiric Tutor, just know that for a little bit more, you could get an actual playable legal copy. There is one card that is reserve list that I also see as a trap as well, that is Gold Border, and that's City of Traders. This card really shines in Legacy, but in EDH, to me specifically, it becomes a lot less attractive. So this is one of the cards that I'm actually going to be avoiding. I'm not really interested in picking up myself. So now that you have a little bit of history about this and you have this link that you can reference yourself, you can go do some of your own research. I'm going to talk to you about my favorite 10 Gold Border EDH cards and what I think have the best value in the long run. All right, first one up, guys, Cradle. This is one of those cards that's been on everybody's radar since this reserve list has started spiking recently. It continues to rise, and the Gold Border is no exception. I still see these for around 150 to 200 in medium play condition on eBay popping up. What you do need to know, if you don't know, is that the regular version of Gaea's Cradle from Urza's Saga is just absolutely going through the roof. You can find a busted copy of the card for around $700 to $800, but all of the near mint copies are now over $1,000. So when you're talking about 1/5 or 1/6 of the price, again, if you're not playing big EDH sanctioned tournaments, if you're just looking for a playable copy of the card, then the Gold Border might be for you. I do remember a couple years ago, the Gold Border Gaea's Cradle, and it's honestly crazy, but I just remember it being around like 40 or 50 bucks. And then you can just see it just shoots up. You know, don't look at that average price that says 10,000. That's just shenanigans. That's people that are listing way above just to drive FOMO and stuff like that. But again, this card, a fraction of the price of one of the best cards ever printed. And these cards are reserve lists. And what that means is they're finite. They're not going to be reprinted again. You'll see variations of them, like Growing Rights of Itlimoc, for example, is an enchantment that flips into a Gaea's Cradle, but the conditions need to be met before that happens. This Gaea's Cradle, it just exists as is. So even as Wizards of the Coast prints cards that are like these popular reserve list cards, you have to remember that players that value redundancy and players that value best in slot are going to look to double up and triple up on these effects wherever they can. Next up, and these are really in no particular order, I'm just talking about my top 10 favorites, we have Yogmoths Will. One of these cards that lets you play stuff from your graveyard. Reserve list, finite, very powerful card. You could see the Judge version, or not the Judge version, but the Gold Border version that we're talking about is a very reasonable price. You can find it around 80 to 90 that I've seen, but it continues to rise. The regular version of this card is getting very expensive. The lowest I think I last saw a copy was $300, and then that's English. The copies other than that you could find like maybe $250 in Japanese or other languages, but even these Gold Border cards are starting to go up in price. So Yogmoths Will, if you don't have a copy of that, it should be on your radar. Next up, we have Tithe from the 1998 deck, also from Visions. Search your library for a Plains card. If you control fewer lands than target opponent, you may search your library for an additional Plains card. Reveal that card to all players, put those into your hand, shuffle your library afterwards. Very, very powerful instant. Normally on my top 10s, you're going to see a lot of enchantments, a lot of artifacts. It's very rare that an instant that isn't like a powerful counterspell like Pact of Negation or Force of Will or like Force of Negation, that kind of stuff makes it on a list like this. But Tithe is just very good. In addition to it being reserve list and being finite, it's one of these cards that is fast mana. It helps you get ahead on mana when you need it. And in white, that can be very, very powerful. But you could see the Visions version of this card starting to go up significantly in price. You could probably, again, do your own research. You might be able to find a card in varying condition for less price than that. But again, these reserve list cards that are not reprinted again are going up, Gold Border or not. After Tithe, Grim Monolith. So you can see $400 here for the average of this card. I still see some floating around on eBay for like $3 to $350. Fast mana combo card, best in slot. I really do love Grim Monolith. It's a very, very powerful card, very powerful effect. Helps you get ahead quickly. And you can see the Championship deck version of this is literally like 1/10 the price. So if you do not have a Grim Monolith, you don't want to spend $400, consider the Gold Border version. This is going to be a good step in the right direction as far as getting those good EDH staples. Like if you're just joining the game, you might be like, man, the reserve list is daunting. Well, check out some of these Gold Border cards. I'm not saying run to the hills and buy all of them, but consider these. Like if you're new, if you're not thinking about Gold Border cards, this is the kind of thing that most EDH circles, most CEDH circles are going to be welcoming to these cards. These players, the bulk of them, I'm not saying all of them, but most players are going to be fine with you playing an alternative to spending thousands upon thousands of dollars to have a competitive deck just so that you can play. Next up, we have another very strong combo-centric card. Recently, you can see on this graph here, just taking off significantly. I picked one of these up for around $100, and I'm happy I did because it just continues to rise. Survival of the Fittest has a Gold Border version as well. And like all of the other cards that we've talked about, it's a fraction of the price. You can see the average around 44. I think that's accurate. I last saw one for around $50. So if you're looking for one in good condition, expect to pay a price that's similar to that. Survival of the Fittest is one of these cards It's just insane, best in slot. It tutors, it is graveyard synergy. I mean, it's a discard outlet. It is just a fantastic card. It's an enchantment, so it's sticky. This is easily one of my favorite MTG cards just because of the sheer power level. Normally, I don't like green very much. Following up Survival of the Fittest, we have Thawing Glaciers. This is one of those cards that's really taken off from alliances recently here. You can see it had a spike in 2018, then it calms down, like calms way down, and now we are on another reserve list trend where reserve list cards are starting to spike again. And as more and more players join the game, more and more people are going to want to acquire these cards and then hold them in the long run. And this is one of those cards that's really good. It comes into play tapped, and for one, you can search your library for a basic land, put it into play tapped. This does not count toward your land limit for the turn, and then you shuffle your library afterwards. At the end of the turn, return Thawing Glaciers to its owner's hand. So it's good for landfall type effects. It filters out your deck. It's a little bit slow, but again, the unique effect is very attractive to players. And these cards here, you can see the Gold Border version of this is very affordable. You can go out, you could probably find one. I think I saw one for around $12. So yeah, Thawing Glaciers, get it on your radar. It's one of my favorite Gold Border cards. And next up we have Academy Rector from 2000 World Championship deck. Academy Rector has really gone crazy, and I do remember these being like around 11 or 12 bucks and just being like, you know, I would rather pick up a regular Rector. And when the Gold Border was around 11 or 12, I remember the regular Academy Rectors in like light play condition were around like 35 to 40, but now you can see, and I'll just show you here, the Urza's Destiny version, the actual legal version, has seen a huge correction. I'm just talking insane. Just look at this. You can see card hanging out, and now you really can't find a copy under 100, and then those near mint copies, you know, it's really hard to tell. Like if a card is in really good condition and it's reserve list, a lot of people aren't playing those, especially if it's like a near mint pack fresh. The price on near mint or pack fresh copies of these cards, it's really hard to determine right now, especially as there's so much volatility. But yeah, Academy Rector, very strong card. And again, you can acquire the Gold Border version for about a fourth the price, about a third of the price of this card. So put it on your radar. Think about it. If you don't have an Academy Rector, it does crazy things. When it dies, you remove it from the game, you go grab something like Omniscience, and then you just win. And following up Academy Rector, we have Replenish, which is return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to play. This is a sorcery. Previous card was a creature. You know how much I love artifacts and enchantments. It says something when I put sorceries and creatures on a list like this. It's either reserve list or the effect is just absolutely gas. And I really do feel like Replenish with cards like Gen that are coming out, and anything that's like heavy enchantments, Replenish just gets more and more powerful as the years go by. The Gold Border version around like 30 to 40 bucks. I think that that's pretty accurate. But then the regular version of Replenish now has, like so many of the cards we're talking about, seen a big correction. You're going to see a lot of these graphs that look like this, where you're going to see in 2018 there's a spike, then it goes down, but now this correction is bigger. This time the spike is bigger, the correction is bigger, and now Replenish, one of these great powerful cards, has seen a big adjustment. Metalworker, I don't really need to talk to you about how crazy good this card is either. What I can say is I remember looking at this card because I was looking at Academy Rector a lot, and this was a couple years ago, and the price of Metalworker when Academy Rector was around like 30 to 35 bucks, I remember Metalworker being like, you know, like 30 to 40 for a played copy, 50 for like near mint. But now you can see a bump here, and this is recent. Just look at that huge jump. So what you can assume then is if this went from this price very quickly, then now the World Championship Metalworker is now the price of what the previous regular Metalworker was. So this price is a little bit higher. I have seen these Metalworkers still recently from around $30 to $40. So if you don't have one, I mean, reveal any number of artifact cards in your hand, add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool for each card revealed this way. So if you're playing like an Urza build, you have tons of artifacts in your hand, Metalworker is going to be absolute gas as far as getting permanents onto the battlefield and winning the game quickly. This card is an absolute lightning rod for whether it's damage effects or artifact destruction. I would kill it on site as much as possible. And again, if there's a creature on the list, you know that it's probably good. I think this card is just very strong. And this one from the 1998 deck, Undiscovered Paradise. Also a Visions card like Tithe that we talked about earlier in the video. So this card, the Gold Border, very cheap, like $3 to $4, but this is another card that I really like that works well with landfall effects. These lands that have been featured in this video, Thawing Glaciers and Undiscovered Paradise, they are very niche effects, but I still like the effects very much. You can see the regular version of this card is going up just like everything else. You can see the graph, very similar to the graphs that we've talked about already. But yeah, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool at the beginning of your next untap phase. Return Undiscovered Paradise to its owner's hand. So again, landfall like I was just talking about, and mana correction. So very good card. I like it a lot. Reserve list as well. And the Gold Border version of this is very cheap. I remember like recently, like $4 or $5, if that. And then lastly, a card that isn't reserve list. Everything else we've talked about is reserve list, but this is discontinued art. It's the OG Force of Will in the Old Border. Force of Will is going to be reprinted into the dirt in the future of Magic the Gathering. But if you do like this art, if you do like that original border, and then clearly the gold copy is going to be cheaper. So if you are on a budget, if you're looking for the cheapest copy of Force of Will just to slam in your EDH deck, go ahead and pick up the Gold Border. Doesn't seem like a bad pickup. And then, yeah, Wizards of the Coast is distancing themselves from the artist Nielsen that did this card. And so we're not going to get into that very much, but that's something that you need to know is like scarcity. You are going to have some players that value scarcity. I hope you've enjoyed this list. I really enjoyed putting it together. I like a lot of these cards. And again, avoid those traps. The Vampiric Tutors, the Phyrexian Arenas, the stuff that's going to be reprinted for sure in the future. And then also consider those very cheap Gold Border cards. If you have a very chill EDH circle, just like anything goes, if they're like down for proxies and that kind of stuff, but you want something a little bit higher end than a proxy, something that was printed by WotC in the past, then consider picking up, you know, stuff like Wasteland, Dust Bowl, Birds of Paradise. All of those kind of cards are great for EDH, and the Gold Border versions are a fraction of the price of the regular playable copies of those cards. But yeah, in the future, Wizards of the Coast is going to be reprinting any cards that are powerful, any cards that are not reserve list, and the reserve list stuff most likely will continue to rise. Is there a bubble? Yeah, probably. Who knows? When's it going to pop? I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work. Magic at this point has withstood the test of time. What do you think about it? Leave it in the comments. What do you think of Gold Border cards? How does your playgroup feel about them? Let me know. I'm interested in it. Until next time, I'm Jake with Jake and Joel Magic, and I'm tapped out.